Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by oldschoollane.blogspot.com and is associated with Channel Frederator, Manic Expression, the Comic Book Cast, and the Mehta Show. Hello everyone, welcome to a very special episode of Casual Chats. It is the 150th episode, and I am really excited about today's discussion because this is a discussion that you guys have chosen. So a few weeks ago, I had posted up a poll on what was going to be the 150th episode topic, and the choices were as followed. So we had The Lion Guard, SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout, acquired Nickelodeon shows, My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, Magic and Magicians, favorite web series, live action Dr. Seuss films, Leica Studios, Cardcaptor Sakura, The Owl House, but by a very, very close margin, second only to the Magic School Bus and the Magic School Bus again, the winner, and this was suggested by Chad. Thank you so much, Chad. He suggested Looney Tunes. So I have with me a very special guest to discuss about Looney Tunes. So please, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay, so I am Thad Komorowski, an animation historian, digital film restoration artist. I wrote a book called Sick Little Monkeys, The Unauthorized Ren Stimpy Story several years ago, and I'm in the works on a history of New York City animation. And I also co-hosted my own podcast, Cartoon Logic, with animation director legend Bob Jakes. And yeah, I'm happy to talk Looney Tunes anytime.
Yeah, now I don't know if you remember this, Thad, but I actually interviewed you over 6 years ago when you first posted up your book. And
Yep, I remember. Yeah, I
yeah,
appreciated that.
oh,
Yes.
absolutely, yeah. So it's nice to actually have you here in the podcast because when I did it, it was a blog interview, and this was back when I was doing blogging. But nowadays, I do my stuff like podcasts and doing videos. So yeah, this is amazing considering that I wanted to have you on the show for quite a while, especially with the whole talks of Ren and Stimpy and all that kind of stuff. But
hmm
yeah, but I thought that, because of, well, let's not get into that, but the whole controversies with Ren and Stimpy, and, because this is a very special occasion for 150 episodes of my podcast, I thought, yeah, it would be nice if we can talk about all things Looney Tunes. So I'm actually curious, how did you first learn about Looney Tunes?
Oh God, I can't really place my finger on it. Very small child. I think I might have seen the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner movie. That was a compilation feature of various Chuck Jones cartoons. I'm not sure if it was that or just individually. I remember the Bugs Bunny cartoon Operation Rabbit, and that sort of kickstarted it. I mean, I have very, very early memories of seeing that cartoon, and that's the first one with Wile E. Coyote speaking, and it
Hmm.
just made a big impression on me and sort of snowballed from there. I know there was a period from maybe ages 7 to 10 where I was absolutely obsessed with Looney Tunes, and that I was up for they considered me for counseling because of it. But you know,
Wow.
well, it's just a phase sometimes kids have,
Oh,
where
absolutely.
all they
Yeah, for
do.
sure. Yeah, I think that as us kids, especially since in the like in the early 90s all the way up to like the like I would say like the late 80s to the early 90s, it's like television was like kind of like our main way into entertainment, next to movie theaters. So this was like before we
hmm
had the internet. This was before we had things like streaming services or anything like that. So in order for us to like
Right.
know about, okay, I want to know about this particular thing that's going on TV. I had to go look through the TV guide and say, okay, there's this one episode of this one show coming out. I'm gonna go watch it. And were you one of those people who actually like every time that a show would come up, would you like tape everything and just like watch it over and over again?
Oh yeah, I would tape all. I would Yeah, I would usually spend any money I could get my hands on blank VHS tapes, and I'd be recording any any airings of the Warner cartoons I could find. I would record them off of Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. TBS, TNT, ABC. There were a lot of outlets for Looney Tunes. There was a period for several years where each any network that had an animation block, you would have a package of the Warner cartoons to show. So there was no shortage of it for a very long time.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think now. It's like, oh, if you want to watch something on Looney Tunes, you go to Cartoon Network or you go to Boomerang or something. But back then, you have to understand that Looney Tunes was in syndication for many networks. I think I remember Jerry Beck did an article many years ago about the importance of Looney Tunes airing on Nickelodeon back in the late 80s and about how that
Hmm.
kind of like brought in a whole resurgence of people loving Looney Tunes again, to the point in which when the animation renaissance happened around the late 80s and early 90s was when we saw a lot of like reboots to a lot of things, with the success of like The Simpsons and Ren and Stimpy, and even to
Hmm.
some extent with like the Muppet Babies, where we had things like Tiny Toon Adventures, and then that spun off to the whole Warner Brothers series of cartoons like Animaniacs and Freakazoid and a whole bunch of those cartoons.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there was definitely a resurgence in the popularity of the original cartoons. That kind of started with Who Framed Roger Rabbit, with there were a couple of the Warner characters in that film, and also the idea of classic animation, was
Sure.
brought back. And there were a couple, and yeah, Nickelodeon was sort of at the forefront of that, and the fact that they were airing these really high quality things from several decades before sort of clued them in. Well, why can't we do new quality things either? I'm sure that had a very big effect on that network.
Yeah, and even with Cartoon Network, in which when they got some of the rights to air some of the old cartoons, including the stuff that Ted Turner had purchased with the old Hanna-Barbera stuff, a lot of people were
Yes.
introduced to that as well. And I even remember like where they would like feature, we're going to have this special segment in which we're going to have like these behind the scenes blips in the background where you get to learn about the behind the scenes on how these cartoons came to be. And oh, this cartoon won an Emmy for this for best animated short, and this cartoon was. I mean, I remember like, they would like feature like Chuck Jones and Tex Avery, where they would like showcase, okay, these are the cartoons that they made, and this is how they did it. And I
Hmm.
remember that those would be showing up a lot on Cartoon Network, which that actually brought more into my acknowledgement of, okay, that this is like Looney Tunes and this is what they would do. And I think that, that was like definitely the starting point. And I think that as time went on, like for people in the 90s, that a lot of the, a lot more shows were starting to come out. Like there was a Sylvester and Tweety mysteries.
Yeah, they always had those to stand back on their legacy characters, and that's sort of where all the Steven Spielberg stuff came out of. They would use those cartoons as their foundation, and they once in a while, when they needed more product, because they felt they couldn't keep showing the old ones forever. That's specifically why they did the series Tasmania, because they had a very popular merchandisable character in the Tasmanian Devil, but Taz was only in maybe about five of the original classic cartoons. I think he might have been in a reprisal short or two, but yeah, you don't have much to go on. And
Yeah, like that was actually an interesting one. Like you have to understand, like I mean, I'm sure nowadays a lot of people know about Taz, but back then he was like one of the minor characters. I mean, alongside with
right.
like, I mean, even Speedy Gonzalez was even in more episodes than Taz.
Well, yeah, Speedy had a very big following in the international market. That's specifically why, in the '60s, when the original studio shut down, they wanted to do more Speedy Gonzalez cartoons, specifically because for the international market, because the character was incredibly popular.
Sure. When I was visiting Dominican Republic multiple times as a child, because
Oh, yes.
my mother's Dominican, and I still have
Right.
family from Dominican Republic. So, what I mean, from the ages of between 5 and 10, my grandmother would take me there every year, and I
Hmm.
remember that I would see like a lot of classic cartoons still on TV. So they didn't have like, I mean, they had like some of the newer stuff, but for the most part, when it came to like after school, and they would be rerunning all the old classic shows from like Hanna-Barbera, and Woody Woodpecker was still really popular over there, and some of the Looney
Woody
Tunes characters.
Woodpecker is very popular in Brazil.
Yeah, it
They're
is.
huge. Pika Power, like that's why they did that new awful CGI movie,
Oh my God.
specifically for the Brazilian market. That was what it
Yeah.
was for.
Even my grandmother knew about, Woody Woodpecker because, he's called El Pájaro Loco in
Ah,
the Spanish countries, which is the crazy bird. That's what it means.
right,
So,
of course.
yeah. So I remember, and
Well,
even when
and
I
they
was
were
like,
cheaper too. They were
yeah,
cheaper
sure,
because
they
it was
were.
cheaper to buy shorts from the 40s, 50s, and 60s than to pay for any of the new shows. So yeah,
Yeah.
they've stayed in a lot of yeah, they've stayed pretty popular and around the world.
It's kind of like the equivalent of how in the 90s where they would like, oh, this anime thing from Japan. We don't have to worry about
Right.
creating a lot of our shows, and we could just use our resources so that we can dub all these things and we can make the money for it. It's like sort of like that equivalent in a way.
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's always the case. Um,
Yeah. No, I'm
um,
actually I'm actually curious, going into all these. Now I know that it's like, oh, picking your favorite child or whatever, but what have been some of your favorite shorts from the classic Looney Tunes?
well, 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 I hate to be predictable or, pedestrian with my choices, but
That's okay.
the all-time classics are my personal favorites. Number one would be Great Piggy Bank Robbery by Bob Clampett,
Oh, that's a great one. Yeah.
Duck Dodgers by Chuck Jones, Stupid Cupid by Frank Tashlin, Back Alley Uproar and Buccaneer Bunny by Friz Freeling. They're all great. I mean,
Oh yeah,
there's at
absolutely.
least a period from 42 to maybe 55 where there's very few pop boilers or dogs. I mean, we can be pretty critical on cartoon logic, but that's just when we're looking at them under a microscope. But there's just way too many. Definitely the big four: Clampett, Jones, Freeling, and Tashlin. Yeah, those can't go wrong with anything by them, especially in the
Sure.
40s.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, when you think of, those kind of names, I mean, Freeling, Jones, even Clampett to some extent, because I know that he did a few, but there was also a few that he did that.
Clampett, yeah,
Go ahead.
Clampett was well, that's sort of the thing with Clampett is that he directed for 8 years, and it gets swept under the rug. There's sometimes a bone of contention with a lot of the bigger Clampett fans because a lot of his shorts were primarily the black and white Porky Pigs, and those were,
Yeah.
we're talking about stuff that's cheaper to syndicate, and of course those were always in the cheaper package, and had some real bastardization happen in the late 60s when Warner's decided to colorize them, which
Oh,
meant
wow. Yeah.
retracing everything frame by frame.
Oof.
Fortunately, those have pretty much been put out of commission. They did colorize them digitally, but even so, those rarely show up anymore. If you look at the streaming networks on Boomerang and HBO Max, they're mostly the black and white versions, fortunately. So,
That's
and
good.
and Clampett did do a period of from about 41 to 45 where he was doing a lot of high quality work with a color unit. That's when he made the masterpieces like Piggy Bank Robbery, Baby Bottleneck, Book Review, Kitty Cornered, Old Gray Hair, Big Snooze. He created Tweety Bird, and yeah, but no, he's definitely an important father of the Looney Tunes style. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Um, other guys did do important work like Frank Tashlin and Art Davis, but they didn't really direct as long as the others, so it's more understandable. But Clampett definitely, and Tex Avery, of course, too, was the
Oh,
founder of
I love Tex Avery's work.
The whole Looney Tunes style really came out of him. The sarcastic anti-Disney edge. There's a great blog by my friend Frank Young. If you look for it, Tex Avery at WB. He's been examining each short that Tex Avery did while he was working for Warner Brothers, because a lot of people look at that as a forerunner to his MGM work where he excelled. But it's like any filmmaker, his style goes all the way back, so you can see all of his tropes and his timing style and gag style being refined in the Warner years.
Yeah. And also, what I really appreciate about the Looney Tunes cartoons, looking back on them, is that not only do they have like distinct personalities with each and every single one of their characters, but you can put them into any situation and it would work. You can do that with a lot of shows nowadays, like a lot of cartoons in which, like, oh, you have one instance in which this person is traveling to this country, or this person is in this house and they're doing a whole bunch of wacky shenanigans, or this person's in the woods and they're being chased around. It's like there's a lot of variety and diversity with these characters that you can be able to put them into any scenario and it'll be funny. And I think that that's what worked, especially if you're like watching like maybe a short, depending on whether you're watching it on TV, or maybe in some cases you'll be watching it in like a film before the movie starts. So I think that what is interesting is that you can be able to take somebody like Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck or any of the sorts and just put them into different situations, and it would be like really refreshing and really unique. And even with something like the Coyote and Roadrunner cartoons, in which like the scenario does play the same, but there's a distinct rule that it like keeps things interesting. Like I think I even read Chuck Jones posting about how to write a Coyote and Roadrunner cartoon. So there's that.
Yeah, he had those rules, but his writer Mike Maltese claimed he made them up. Those were apocryphal. But if you look at the cartoons, they kind of follow rules by design, but they don't adhere to them like strictly as a religion.
Sure.
But that's one of those things, latter-day revisionism by Jones. But because he was the artsiest of the directors and the most high-minded, for lack of a better word. But with these characters, these. Let me give me a second. I just want to how I want to phrase this.
I would kind of describe them as like they're kind of like vaudevillian actors, and
absolutely, they're strictly from vaudeville, because they that's what all those guys grew up on, learning from silent comedy mostly, and early sound comedy, like Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. That was their influence, as well as the stage vaudeville. And a lot of those characters, specifically the one character that comes to mind immediately with what you're saying, place into any situation, is Sylvester the Cat. He was primarily in a lot of cartoons with Tweety, but you could put him, he could be Porky Pig's terrified cat, or he can be father to a very demeaning son, or he can be,
with Speedy Gonzales.
With Speedy Gonzales, exactly. Or he could, you could just do anything with this guy. He was their stock utility player, and he was always funny no matter what you did it. And he was always still the same character, even if you were putting him in a different role. He was identifiable. Like, there's very few where you would see, well, oh, Sylvester wouldn't do or say that, but he is. He can either be the predator bully, or he can be the victim. He's just always still very funny. Bugs, to a certain extent, is an emotionally cool character. There's a couple of earlier ones from the 40s where he's more, what's the word? Bombastic. and a couple of the earlier ones that Bob McKimson did when he directed. And they're good shakeups from the formula, but Bugs to me, he's really the wise guy that writer Mike Maltese perfected when he was writing with Friz Freleng, and then
Mm-hmm.
later when he was exclusively with Chuck Jones. That's the Bugs I know and love. And going off of that, Daffy Duck is another great stock utility player, because if you look at all of his cartoons, other than the trilogy of the Rabbit Season, Duck Season trilogy, every single one of those cartoons is different. They're not a variation on the same theme. You might see a gag or two you might have seen elsewhere before, but they're all unique and fresh. And I kind of think that's the main reason why Jones decided to pair him with Bugs, because he was getting to not only fulfill his obligation of doing Bugs Bunny cartoons per his contract, but he was also getting to use a character in Daffy that he became much more interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that worked because they
Oh
have
yeah,
this unique dynamic that is able to clash with each other, whether it be
yeah.
with Bugs's sarcastic tone or Daffy's short temper that he can't really take too much of all of, Bugs's antics. So that's what made them work.
Oh yeah, it's totally cribbed from the Bing Crosby and Bob Hope dynamic. They made Paramount. They made features for Paramount for years, and that was their dynamic too. Bing as the cool, calm, collected guy, and Bob Hope as the egotistical maniac. And yeah, but it worked really well in the 50s, and they sort of carried it on forever in all the reprisals. I've sort of seen it abandoned in recent years because the reprisals suddenly decided that the greedy miser persona of Daffy was taboo, and they've gone back to the brain dead Daffy from the first couple of years, but they sort
Hmm.
of seem to have forgotten that there's this whole middle period of the entirety of the 40s and early 50s where he was a much richer character. So he didn't have to be either one or the other. He could be whatever the cartoon calls for.
Hmm.
Like, and say Jones's Tom Turk and Daffy. That's pretty early. It's a 1944 cartoon. He's still a miserable character, abusing Tom Turk, who's getting chased by Porky Pig, and then giving his position away. But he's still insane, so it's still really funny, and you're not really getting one or the other in something like that.
Sure. And whether like and also he played such great characters, like he was
Oh
Duck
yes, yep.
Dodgers,
Duck Twacey,
Duck
Duck
Twacey.
Twacey, Duck
He was Robin
Dodgers.
Hood.
Yep. Robin Hood, Scarlet Pumpernickel,
Yep.
uh, Dorlock Holmes, the Great Detective. Uh, Let me see what. Oh God, and a bunch of other ones.
Yeah.
He was great in character roles. And yeah, it's obvious those guys had the most fun with him because, as I said, Bugs, you sort of have to stab. He was their A game. Daffy was always considered at the studio the lesser player. I don't know if that worked into his persona and his resentment of Bugs in these cartoons, but he was always considered, well, if you're doing a Daffy Duck picture, you're doing the lesser picture.
Yeah, kind of like a B project in which like an
Yep,
episode,
exactly.
there's like the A project in which like their best animators and their best writers are like doing this huge passion project while the B team, who have to do like the lesser character and the story is not as like
Right.
fleshed out. Yeah, I guess
Well, I
maybe
got to tell you, they put their A game into most of those Daffies because I just listed all of my favorites, and most of those, the first three that came to mind were all Daffies. So,
yeah, I mean, like you don't underestimate the B projects. I mean, I've talked over the
nope.
years about how, there were a lot of projects that were considered to be B projects, a lot of films and all that kind of stuff, and then they
Well,
turned out to be
SpongeBob was considered the B project.
exactly.
They uh, they thought Cat Dog was going to be the winner,
Yep.
and they didn't bet on that horse. They bet on the wrong horse there. So
Yeah, they sure did. But yeah, I mean, yeah. So anybody who is in the industry, if you're working on a project that is not like the higher up compared to another project that the same studio is working on, don't sell yourself short. I mean, you never know what could happen.
No, and plus you're probably going to get away with a lot more if because the executives' eyeballs are going to be kept off of it. So yeah, definitely good piece of advice is keep it on time and on budget. And if it, you know, that's the dirty secret. Keep it on time and on budget, and that'll keep everyone's eyes off of it. So
Absolutely.
you'll be able to get away with a lot more.
Yeah, I think also another thing that like I really was impressed, going into the whole references and between like Bugs and Daffy. It's like, when looking back on some of these cartoons, I didn't know that there were so many references to like celebrities. Like I mean, I saw like Frank Sinatra and Peter Lorre and such, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I didn't see that the first time. So it's like, yeah, I mean, essentially like very similar to a lot of, cartoons that are going on today. It's like they poke fun of pop culture references, and they feature a lot of celebrities that were hugely popular at the time, and they would just make a whole bunch of jokes. It's like, oh, Peter Lorre has like the sulken face and he talks funny, or oh, Frank
Mm-hmm.
Sinatra is like really skinny and he's attracting all the girls with the chickens, especially like Frank Sinatra is a
Yeah.
chicken. Like, okay.
Well, they were a lot better with that, and that sort of lends itself to the Warner cartoons' timelessness.
Yeah.
Because like you don't as a kid you don't really get who these you might not get who these caricatures are or what that was a reference to. It's just funny on its own. It doesn't see when you failed at parody or satire. If you need to know what the thing is that you're
You're
referencing,
referencing,
you
yeah.
have knowledge of it. It's there's a couple of Bob McKimson shorts from the 50s that sort of fail in that regard, but they're very few and far between.
Hmm.
Because like Foghorn Leghorn is ripoff of Kenny Delmar's Senator Claghorn radio character, and nobody remembers that character, but
Nope.
everyone remembers Foghorn Leghorn, and Kenny Delmar was very resentful of that, but Foghorn eventually took on a life of his own, where he wasn't just referencing, I say somebody knocked. He's taken on this bombastic personality, this having this abusive tit for tat relationship with a bulldog. I mean, with a barnyard dog, and he's mooching off of Miss Prissy, the widow hen, or trying to escape her marriage proposals. They had such good people writing these things. Warren Foster and Ted Pierce wrote most of the Foghorn series, so shout out to them as well.
Hmm.
Um, and and I'm trying to think. But yeah, you just don't. That's what they have. They try to sell Disney as timeless, but the Warner cartoons truly are the most timeless because everyone's still really interested in them, and everyone gets upset when they reinvent them. So you don't want to mess with this sure thing. Whereas something like some of the new Disney Mickey Mouse stuff they're doing, where they're totally overhauling the character,
It is
nobody's so
completely
much mind.
unrecognizable.
Yeah, 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 exactly. And no one's really upset with that. People actually really like those. I don't per se, but
I have not seen enough to state my opinion.
right. It's kind of really turning him into SpongeBob more or less.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
but so yeah, you go from having nothing in a character to just giving him, a new model and personality. Yeah, that might be an improvement in some regard.
Sure.
But with the Warner characters, they've got a sure thing, and that's sort of where Pete Brownguard is going in that direction with the Looney Tunes cartoons he did. They're actually still being made a little bit. I have no idea where those new things are going to be turning up or when. They kind of screwed themselves on that. It's been, when did HBO Max launch? In May?
I think
And there's,
so.
yeah, there still hasn't been a new batch of them yet.
Yeah, I
which
don't know
is
why. I
kind of
don't know why.
sickening.
For some reason, I don't know why. And they did this like back in the Looney Tunes show as well, and New Looney Tunes,
Yep.
which was originally called Wabbit. Like for some reason, they keep delaying their Looney Tunes properties, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I haven't, I follow some of the storyboard artists on Twitter, and they'll be like,
Mhm.
oh, I worked on this a whole year ago, and here's the animatic for it, and it's like, huh. I mean, I understand that it takes about 9 months to make a cartoon, sure, but for some reason, the
A
delay of
lot
this was
faster
like,
now.
okay,
You
yeah.
know what? This is what this is. It is a repeating pattern. They get all hot for it. Oh, we're not going to screw it up this time. We did it right, and then that they really hot start, and then it just peters out cold,
Mm,
which really stinks in this case because they did try hard. I wasn't in love with everything I've seen so far, and I have seen some stuff that hasn't uh, been online yet, but there have been some. It's a much more solid reprisal project than anything I've seen since basically the Greg Ford and Terry Lennon shorts of the early '90s. So, regardless of what I think, people really seem to like them. People want to see them, but there seems to be some high up conspiracy in the Warner hierarchy that really doesn't want to see these characters survive anymore. And that for the longest time, they were not available readily to a whole generation of kids when they put them exclusively on Cartoon Network. So the ball was in their court. And when they got capricious, you know, took them off the schedule. So they were very hard to access easily. I mean, I know we had the DVD collections, but that really isn't the same as being able to see it, as a kid seeing it randomly on TV. Because, what kids are just going to run out and go buy, a $60 DVD set,
oof. Yeah.
which fortunately, you know, they bounced back. I mean, they're all over Boomerang and the Boomerang app and the HBO Max app. There's like a selection of some 350 or 400 cartoons on each of the streaming services. I don't know how much of it is overlap, so I don't know
Hmm.
the whole real number. But yeah, you can see. Basically, you can anyone of any age can go and see it, which is a great thing, making them that accessible
Sure.
again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can understand, the inconsistent quality of the popularity of the characters because, depending on what time period they came out in and depending on how often they're shown on TV, especially with the industry, constantly changing about like, okay, this is the kind of stuff that kids are into now. It's like, oh, this whole, 7 minute comedy thing or whatever. It's like, everybody's into superheroes or everybody's into anime. Everybody's into ongoing deep
Mhm.
story arcs or everybody's into this or whatever. But I think that, nowadays, I think because that comedy has become a lot more, popular with a lot of shows, especially with on Netflix and other streaming services. I think that there. I mean, I don't see. I can understand why that Looney Tunes started to become like really popular again. I think that in a way, it kind of like never left us, especially for those who are like dying to look for it. Like if you could find somebody who had it on VHS, or if you did know somebody who had that streaming service and has access to all these cartoons, then yeah, you could be able to get it easily. I mean, we're lucky that Looney Tunes wasn't like lost media, in which like only very few people remember it, and then you have to wait until decades in which like somebody can find the original films and then are able to spend like thousands of dollars to restore it as like a massive passion project. Um,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I think I even heard of like this one person many years ago who actually did do that for like the old 1900s cartoons, in which like they were able to like find a lot of them that have been lost over time and were able to digitally restore it and like put it on Blu-ray or something. And that's a
Yeah, lots of
niche
people
thing.
are. Yeah, a couple of people are doing it. It's a niche thing, and The unfortunate thing is that the copyright law has prevented any thing to be done with some of these other studios projects, with these other studios libraries. So you got to wait on them to do it or wait out the copyright. But they they are restoring them as part of a passion project, it seems like, or initiative more or less, because HBO Max did put up a ton of cartoons from the 30s and early 40s, which is I found very shocking. Um, they look mostly great, and because most of them didn't have any of the continuing characters, so that was the big shock. So, um, but if they get them all done, that'd be great. I don't expect to see them all there, but
Sure.
just as long as they get available some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing that I really do appreciate about the Looney Tunes, looking back on it, is that their use of music, which I
Mm-mm.
think that, I don't know about, for today's kids, but this is what, watching the Looney Tunes shorts really got me a huge appreciation for classical music.
Oh
Like if
yeah, with everybody. That's their introduction to opera and all the just all the classical Beethoven and Franz Liszt and all that.
hmm
Especially that's why they did Bugs Bunny on Broadway or Bugs Bunny at the Symphony. That's a very popular long running show where the orchestra performs live music to the cartoons projected.
How many
Um,
cartoons can you say that do that?
Oh wow. Well, they have a select few where, if they know the piece of music, they could do it, and conduct the orchestra that way. Or there's a couple where they actually still have the old Carl Stalling and Milf Franklin music sheets, so they know exactly how where to hit each beat and all of that.
hmm
There's like with the things like Bob Clampett's Corny Concerto, or Friz Freeling's Pigs in a Polka, or Jones's Rabbit of Seville. That's all pre-existing music that they could, easily do, and
Sure.
a composer or conductor could easily do that. There's a couple of others where they had all the original music sheets, like there's a Roadrunner they show. And there's Porky Pig and Sylvester Jumpin' Jupiter. I know was screened there because they have the original sheet music for it, so
hmm
they're able to do it that way. There's nothing. What's the word? There's nothing scientific really about it. It's just just the chance that they would be able to do it that way.
Yeah, and I think, the only thing that I can recall that, oh, they're playing music based off of this show, and I'm talking about animated. I know with live action, sure, they can do that. I mean, I know that, when Polaris was on tour, when Pete and Pete was celebrating its 20th anniversary, they did bring them back to do a few songs from their album. I think the only thing that I
Right.
can remember was like when I remember the Pillows when they were releasing some of their songs on CD for Fully Cooley, and then they performed a live concert showing some of their
Hmm.
songs. That's the only one I can think of. I mean, I'm sure that like maybe I don't know, maybe like Steven Universe probably does the same thing, but for the most part, I don't really hear a lot of that. Video games, yes, Final Fantasy, Legend of Zelda, they do that, but for
Right.
an animated series where it would have like this full-blown orchestra where you could actually hear people playing music live while the show is being going, that's an amazing achievement.
Sure. Yeah. No, but well, yeah, it does take a certain uh art to it is a certain art, yeah, but they did it there's always been musical accompaniment, going back to the silent era, so it's nothing new. So um but yeah, did you have any other questions, because I might need to wrap this soon.
Sure, sure.
um
I guess really quickly,
sure.
what were your favorite minor characters? Like the characters that only show up like a handful of times and you enjoyed them?
Sure. Hubie and Bertie, the two mice based on the Dead End Kids. One's always slapping the other, making up his mind for him, and they're always torturing this neurotic cat, Claude. Claude Cat definitely too. Other favorite minor characters, the Three Bears, of course, Chuck Jones and Mike Maltese creation.
Yeah.
The original abusive nuclear family. Trying to think of some of the other characters.
I
Witch
mean, like,
Hazel, of
there's, yeah, Witch
course.
Hazel's
Yeah,
one of my
Witch Hazel
favorites.
shows up a couple times to great effect, especially in Broomstick Bunny. That's a real tour de force for June Foray. Trying to think.
Well, before we continue on, like, major shout outs to people like Mel Blanc and June Foray giving these characters just amazing
Mhm.
bravado with their
Ar-
performances.
Arthur Q. Bryan, who did Elmer Fudd originally,
Yep.
B. Benaderet, Stan Freberg,
Yep, Ken Rogers.
Kent Rogers was the original voice of Beaky Buzzard, another favorite,
Mhm.
who was only in a handful of cartoons. Um, Other favorite of the minor characters. Um, bu- 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 I kind of like Sniffles the mouse. I know not everybody does, but I especially liked him when Jones rewrote him as a little blabbermouth that
Mhm.
won't shut up talking for a few cartoons. I think Sam Sheepdog and Ralph Wolf, very minor series, but very funny
Mhm.
concept of characters literally fulfilling their roles out of a job obligation. Um, but yeah, those are definitely all favorites.
Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure. For a lot of people, they love Michigan J. Frog.
yeah, his original name was actually Enrico, but I don't
Enrico.
know how. Yep, that's when they showed it on the original Bugs Bunny show. They would have little previews of coming up next week, Daffy Duck or Sylvester and Tweety, and when it came time to show One Froggy Evening, it said Enrico. so,
Interesting.
uh, so but yeah,
And
yeah. That I don't know how he came about to get his moniker because I know Jones did a lot of rebranding in his later years
mhm.
of characters like Gossamer, the big orange hairy monster, wasn't originally called that, and Marvin the Martian, of course, was a latter day
Yeah.
recreation. I mean, later day rebranding. Yeah, so.
Quickly, I know, we're running out of time for here, but your thoughts about the other incarnations that came out, after the classic shorts. Like, we had like as you were mentioning earlier in the show, there was Tasmania, Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries, Lunatics Unleashed. Um,
Yeah, but most of those, most of those, the less you say, the better.
sure,
Tiny Toons, there's a love-hate thing with it. I mean, a lot of it really didn't hold up very well, but it was an incredibly important series, and it was a lot better than a lot of the other product airing in 1990. Definitely a
sure.
big step up for TV animation. Sylvester and Tweety Mysteries is actually a very well produced series, even though it's not my cup of tea. Same with the Duck Dodgers TV show that Spike Brandt and Tony Cervone did with Tom Minton and Paul Dini.
Hmm.
That's a very well art directed show, but a lot of these things they're just too exposition-y and dialogue heavy, which a lot of modern TV animation does favor, but it's partly because you can't there's it's not so much the budget, but it's the mindset that kids won't accept it if someone isn't talking. They'll change the channel and get bored. But as the originals prove, as after generation, they keep coming back to the original cartoons. So
That's true.
point proven wrong. But as far as the other reprisals, um, my favorite of the 90s ones was probably Greg Ford's Blooper Bunny. That was pretty funny. But I do love, what's that guy's name? Steve Peck. He did a student film in the late 70s, Rabbit Habit. If you look that up, I think that, as crude as that is, it nails the characters. And apparently Tex Avery really loved it.
Oh,
So
that's
it's,
awesome.
so, yeah. So, uh, Chuck Jones didn't think much of it, but Tex did like it. But
That's cool. I know that Chuck, he was off doing his own stuff afterwards. He
yeah,
did a lot of stuff for UPA, and he
he
did,
did, he did the one feature for UPA that was on Warner's time though, and that's why he got fired originally.
yeah, Gay
Um,
Paris.
yeah, he did that. He had his own studio through MGM where he did a lot of the Tom and Jerry's, and he did his one masterpiece there, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and
Absolutely.
Horton Hears a Who, and then he had his own studio, and he was doing a lot of Kipling adaptations.
He did the Phantom
One
Toll Booth.
yeah, I did that. But yeah, he's sort of sad story, like just petering out, not really
Yeah.
getting why. But he was the best shorts director for a very long time, so he has that always to fall back on.
Yeah. And as for the movies, I would highly recommend that you listen to the What a Cartoon podcast, where you actually did talk about Space Jam.
Oh
So
yeah, I broke my vow of
I
talking
am
about that.
so
Yeah.
sorry.
Well, no, when you do research and know people, you know about all this stuff, and I did know some people who worked on Space Jam, so I was able to
Sure.
talk about it with Bob and Henry there. Um, I could probably do the same with Back in Action, but like I said, I don't recommend anyone really go after those films. There's no hidden classic there. Um, and I, Space Jam 2 is definitely happening. It is in
Yes, it
production.
is.
So that's unfortunately, as I talked a bit in that podcast with Bob and Henry, for a lot of people, Looney Tunes nostalgia starts and ends with Space Jam. So it's yeah, so I don't know what to think or say.
I mean, I can understand why they decided to do the sequel in addition to, oh, nostalgia and all that stuff, but it's the highest grossing basketball movie of all time, which, okay, I guess that's another
Are there
reason for
many
it.
others?
That's right. As for many
Right.
others. But yeah, I mean, from what I've heard in the synopsis, oh, it's like, okay, so we have, LeBron James, and there's going to be like different situations with, him having to play basketball because of, I don't know, something involving with like bringing all the classic characters again. It's like, okay, I mean, I'm curious, but I'm not like wanting to watch it, but
No, I don't
eh.
think anyone really is. You always still have the old ones to fall back on, and they're still readily available. So you know what, it keeps the characters in the public's eye, and I can't really wait expound too much energy. It's like, oh, they didn't do this right, or they're doing this wrong.
Right.
So, but which is why I can't, if there's things I don't like about the new Looney Tunes cartoons, but there's a lot of stuff I do, and they are trying, and it's you sort of got to go into any of these reprisals of these classic characters knowing you're going to see a failure. So once it isn't so much a failure, it's like, oh yeah, I actually kind of like this. And yeah, like I said, there's a couple of the Looney Tunes cartoons they're doing a really good job on. So, um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Absolutely. And, speaking of the newer Looney Tunes cartoons, a shout out to Ryan Kramer, who actually
Yes.
works on that show. He was originally supposed to be here as a guest, but due to conflicting schedules, he wasn't able to join. But no, shout out to Ryan. Thank you very much for your time on almost coming on to the show. It was really appreciative. Anyway, so yeah, Thad, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It was wonderful having you here.
All right. Well, thank you, Mar. Thank you, Patricia.
So yeah, tell everybody where people can find you at.
Well, I have my own podcast. You can find it wherever podcasts are available, called Cartoon Logic. And we also have a Patreon, patreon.com/Cartoon Logic, where we're doing a lot of bonus features. We're doing a bonus podcast called Spinach Scrutiny, where we're examining the Fleischer Studio Popeye cartoons year by year. You can find me on Twitter at All News Bad News. And yeah, just hit me up. And if you have anything to ask or any topics you want to hear us discuss on Cartoon Logic, just let us know. So yeah, thank you, Patricia.
Absolutely. Yeah, so thank you to Chad for recommending that I talk about Looney Tunes, and thank you for all who actually voted on the topic. And as mentioned before, the one that went into second place will come out pretty soon, and sadly, as for the others, they'll have to be in the back burner for another time. So thank you so much for listening, everyone. Let us know in the comments below about your thoughts on Looney Tunes, whether it be the classic series or the shows or even the movies. Anyway, so let us know about your favorite character, your favorite episode, your favorite animator and director. That's it. Hope to see you around soon, and take care.